My name is Laurie Gagan, and I am joined this evening by one of my amazing co-hosts, Kathleen Hallal, and the owner of Starry Garden Farms in our local Heber Valley. And I'm honored this evening. Um, they'll be talking about regenerative farming. But before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about Wellness Crusaders and our mission on mainstreetmediautah.com. The Wellness Crusaders and our mission is to educate and empower you to make informed choices for your health, the health of our children, the health of our grandchildren, our communities, and our earth. We are committed to fostering a world where the balance between human health and an environmental stewardship is respected and nurtured. We hope that you will join us on our holistic and transformative journey as we work together to create a healthier, more harmonious world for all. And we're hopeful again that you will join our crusade. And now I'm going to let Kathleen and Russ, I want to welcome you both this evening. And I'll let the two of you get started.
Great.
Thanks, Laurie. How are you? I thank you so much for joining us, Russ, on our podcast.
My pleasure. It's great to be here.
You know, we are very interested in helping the community in Utah and also throughout the United States to have healthier practices, to have healthier food, healthier communities, and to be aware of ways in which we can change what people have been doing, like in terms of using chemical inputs, and kind of get off the chemical inputs and figure out how to be productive and successful with their farms or even their home gardens by using different methods. And so I find your story fascinating because you have had an amazing journey with your wife, moving along and getting into regenerative farming and doing so much for the community. And so I would like to ask you a little bit to introduce yourself and then share your story, like how did you get started and what are you trying to do for the community here in Heber? Because I just think it's amazing and you should share.
Yeah. Well, my journey started basically when I was born. Because my mother, she was in charge of the garden, and she had about 3/4 to an acre of garden, and that's how we lived. And we did not use, even back then, and this was 70 plus years ago, and we never used pesticides or herbicides even then, and so I grew up that way. Being self-sufficient, self-reliant on our own farm. But as we, my wife and I are both educators, and we have always loved gardening, and we've always loved developing the ground, soils, and growing a garden with my family. I always said that a lot of people is in difficult areas of actually growing plants, soils, so forth. And people would say, why are you even growing here? You can't grow anything here. And I said, well, if it does nothing more than raise kids and grow kids, then I've done my job.
And this was in Nevada originally.
This was in Nevada.
Rocky soil.
Yeah, very alkali. I call it the land of no trees, but it just, you couldn't grow anything, but we did, and I mainly grew kids. So, but when we came to Heber, this is a beautiful area, but there, we also ran into our problems here in developing the soils and so forth, and dealing with weeds and things like that. You just, all gardeners, farmers deal with.
Tell us about the process a little bit. After you moved to Heber, you and your wife opened a Montessori school. Is that so?
Yeah.
And you also started creating your farm.
Right. So yeah, we started a private school called Starry Garden Montessori School. And we also started our little farm. And so we actually, my wife and I have just maybe a little under 3/4 of an acre. And so when we first started the farm, it was pasture ground, and it had been pasture ground for years. I probably had always been that way. So in my endeavor to plant grass, to plant a garden, I got out there and I thought, man, this ground is so nice, black soil, and I found out that the black soil was clay, and it was hard, and I had to use a pickaxe to actually dig into the soil, and that began my adventure of knowing that I needed to start amending the soil and developing the soil, and that's taken several years to actually get it to where it is now.
But that's kind of what regenerative farming is like. I mean, that's what the tenets are about. These farmers come into situations where, for whatever reason, their soil is poor or
Yes.
unfarmable, and they slowly go through kind of a conversion process.
Yes.
And can you talk a little bit about how, for example, you changed the soil on your farm? How did you soften up that clay?
Yeah. Well, most people know that clay has a lot of minerals in it. It's actually good, but it's so tight that it suffocates the plant roots. And so it doesn't allow the plants to really grow. It dries out and that gets wet, and it suffocates the plant. But so the plant cannot get to the nutrition that's there. So I knew that we had to get compost going and get some mulch into the soil and get it loosened up. Because once you loosen it up, then it also makes the minerals and nutrients of the soil to be able to start being usable.
Be taken up by the plants.
Right,
The softer the soil is, the more sort of soft soil and earthworms and biological activity you have, the deeper the roots can grow, the better the soil holds water. You require less water. The roots grow deeper. The plants are stronger and healthier.
Yes.
It's all so beneficial.
Yes, and that's really true. And so I started looking around, because to buy that for 3/4 of an acre would have been a huge expense. But I found a farm that they had race horses, or actually jumping horses, and so they spoil the horses with some great, very shredded
Probably alfalfa.
wood chips, and then you had also the mixture of the hay, which is a grass mixed with the alfalfa, and then a little bit of manure. And so I found this place, and I thought, wow, this is a gold mine. And I just said, what are you doing with this? And they says, would like to get rid of it. And I said, I
have a truck.
I will manage this for you if you'll put me in charge of it, and I'll manage it. So I brought in over 100 loads, 10 cubic yards, 100 loads onto my property.
I wish we could share a picture of your trailer that you pull behind your truck. It's big.
Yeah, it's big. And so I put 100 loads on that, tilled it in, and I know, a lot of people talk about no-till garden, but it was at the point that I had to till. I had to get that soil
Sometimes
mixed
to get
in.
it going, you have to
You have
start.
to jumpstart it, and so to get that, and by the time I was done, that soil was so nice and loose, and I could walk on top of that. Before, you would walk on it, and you would have an inch or two of clay at the bottom of your foot. But once we got that good compost in that soil, it was like walking on a cushion. And
that's what you want. You want that
That's-
spongy feeling,
yes.
because that means it's loose enough that
Right.
the roots can go down.
and nothing
so
would
on.
collect on your feet,
Oh, yeah.
So if you're not collecting mud on your feet, then you've got a good consistency, good mix there for your soil.
Did you notice the color changing too? Regenerative farmers often talk about chocolate cake. They want chocolate cake soil that looks like very dark chocolate cake. And it's kind of, the more minerals you have in it, the healthier it is, the more biological activity there is, the darker the color gets. And then also, when you're talking about the texture not sticking to your boots, you know,
Yes.
that's one thing. But another thing is that you can ball it up too. I mean,
Yes.
clay, you could probably do that, but a lot
Yes.
of soil, it's unhealthy. It's kind of sandy and it won't
Yeah.
stick together.
Right.
You want it to be dark,
Yeah.
spongy, and kind of stick together
Yeah.
nicely.
Yeah, and in mixing it with that dark clay, it kind of lightened up the dark clay a little bit. But the nice thing about the compost that we is using, it continues to break down into the soil. And as you do that, as it continues to break down into the soil, it continues that process of decomposing. Worms come in, and that's a big thing. I can dig anywhere on my property now, and every shovelful,
Earthworms.
every shovelful now I get worms.
That's the amazing
So-
thing about regenerative farming,
Yes.
that you put nature to work for you.
Yes,
You know, termites, dung beetles, earthworms,
right,
you know, bacteria,
right,
all these things start to work for you.
right. Yeah, the one thing that I found was that that I didn't really recognize until later was that as I was investigating the very compost that I was using, having used wood, which I found out later, wood, and I discovered this through just going through a dense forest, because you know that the forest actually creates its own compost, but there's a very unique thing in
Yes.
forest, and that's your mycorrhiza begins to develop, and it loves wood chips, and it begins to break that down. But not only that, the mycorrhiza I found that was actually because of the wood chips that had been decomposed in my compost had the mycorrhiza in it. And so, as we know, the mycorrhiza is something that once it gets started, it's just an absolute miracle the way it works, because it goes deeper, and it's like a spider
It's
web.
miraculous.
Yeah, it's a spider web
It's
that just,
communication.
yeah, it's actually just goes throughout the soil. But the interesting thing about it is that the plants once the main plant roots are established, it establishes hair roots. Once the hair roots, there's a message that's sent out that draws the mycorrhiza to it. And once the mycorrhiza binds with the hair roots, it begins this symbiotic relationship
Yes.
that's established, and that mycorrhiza feeds the plant minerals and
Talk-
mines it.
Talk about the exchange. When
Yeah,
the sunlight comes and the plant pulls down the carbon in the sunlight,
yes,
and the plant produces sugars,
yes,
which the mycorrhiza like candy, they
Right.
want that.
yeah.
And then in exchange, they bring nutrients to the plant.
Yeah.
It's a trade.
Yeah, it's really quite miraculous in that, and how that works, how nature works together, and the microbiology in the soil is so important. And this is one of the reasons that I see that people started using chemicals, chemical fertilizers, was because if you don't have the mycorrhiza fungi developed in the soil, which used to be always there, but because of the way we've treated our soils, it's killed the mycorrhiza in the soil. But if you've got that mycorrhiza working in the soil, then the plant, well, if it's not there, then the plant loses the hair roots within about 3 weeks after that's been established. If it can't make a connection with the mycorrhiza, then the hair roots disappear, and then the main roots of the plant are on their own. You see,
That's
they're on their
right.
own, and if it doesn't have the right minerals and whatever around the roots,
Then they need
Yeah.
the chemical inputs
Right,
that the
and-
chemical dealers also sell. nitrogen, synthetic nitrogen,
Yes, which
fertilizers,
is-
whatever, but the plants aren't truly healthy on their own,
No.
like they are when they have the healthy roots. Like
Right.
for farmers who have been practicing regenerative practices for, a couple seasons and they really get it going, when they pull their plants out of the earth, it's amazing. Not only do you have the chocolate cake soil and the earthworms,
Right.
but when you see the roots, they're super tall. And then they have all the little hairs.
Yes.
And that's the sign that you have all of this life going on under the soil,
Yeah.
which is benefiting everyone. And it's what you want. It's
Right.
what you want. But you get that by avoiding a lot of the typical chemical inputs that everyone thinks they need.
Yes. Yeah, it's so important that people begin to understand that this is, I mean, whether it be large farmers, commercial farmers, just gardeners, they have to understand that one concept is they have to get nature working together in kind of a harmonic relationship with each other.
Yes.
Otherwise you're saying, well, what's wrong with my plant? And then they're saying, well, you've got to have more sulfur, you got to have more magnesium, you've got to have different, minerals in there. And so then they begin to and these could be raw minerals, but the problem is then you start getting salts. They may work a season or two, but then the salts build up in the soil to where it then destroys, if there was any mycorrhiza there, it kills the mycorrhiza as well.
Right.
As well as start the plants just can't live in the amount of salts that are left in the soil.
To get started, again, just like the tilling, sometimes you do need those inputs.
Yes.
But once you get going, the idea is that everything's in balance and there's like a symphony going on under the soil, and the bacteria and the roots and all the life under the soil that we don't see. It's all communicating with one another and exchanging this and that and helping one another to thrive and be healthy. And this also helps to fight off disease.
Oh, yeah.
So
Definitely.
again, you need fewer chemical inputs because you
Wow.
have a healthier system.
Yeah, and I find that I have less problems with bad insect problems, or plant disease because of that.
Yes, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It truly is miraculous. Once it gets going, it's
Right.
just, people can't believe it, when
Right,
they see it.
yeah.
And a lot of the farmers who have changed to regenerative practices, and they're now doing it on very large scale farms. There's a farmer who is starting to do it now on a farm the size of Los Angeles, which is huge.
Yeah.
And
Which is wonderful.
no problem. It's all the same principles. It just goes. It's just
Yeah.
letting nature work for you. And
Right.
then these farmers save so much money on the inputs.
I mean, you just realize, therefore, I remember talking with a farmer, he says he used to spend so much on just the fertilizers itself. But once he moved away from that and started using other crops which complement, like if you're going to use instead of using a lot of nitrogen, you plant peas or other plants that are nitrogen fixing into the soil, and then you get that nitrogen is much more easily assimilated into the plant than if you was to use other types of nitrogen.
Yeah, the synthetic nitrogen is sort of a quick fix. It makes your plants green up. But under the soil, you're not having the root activity or the roots going deep or any of that symphony kind of
Right.
that you want to see. But when
Exactly.
you approach it naturally, you get the symphony, and
Yeah.
it's actually better nutrition.
Yeah, and I found that, now, since we've moved to that type of growing in our garden is, it's a lush garden. You've been there.
Oh,
I
it's a dream.
Yeah.
It's a dream. I thought it was bigger than 3/4 of an acre.
It's
You're
actually, we
surprising
have a
me.
little bit in the front. So
Yeah.
actually, it's probably more like an acre because we have quite a bit in the front of the house, and then we have the rest of it in the back. So
Tell everyone about what you have on your farm, because this is the other thing that's just amazing, the variety on your farm, all of the animals, and that you are raising an abundance of food so that
Right.
you can even share with your community.
right.
and you're storing food for your family. It's unbelievable. Please share.
Well, this is kind of an experimental farm, and we had this idea in mind as we began the farm, was to create a self-reliant or self-sustainable farm. And so that's what we were moving towards. So like I say, I with the idea that I would not bring any chemicals onto the farm. That means fertilizers and anything else. So I found in doing research on all of the plants that I raised there, all of the minerals and nutrition that's within the plants that I was growing had all of the necessary minerals that I needed to recreate my fertilizers. And then I started.
Did you have the plants analyzed? Like, how did you know that?
Yeah, I did a lot of research on the internet as far as just the breakdown of plant nutrition, different plants, and what minerals, because there's some plants that have more sulfur or more magnesium or more nitrogen than other plants. And so in combining those and then composting them. So I don't let anything go to waste on my farm. Everything goes back into the compost pile. And not only that, but I have goats. So anything I have left over, or if I'm cutting or pruning back, then I feed them to my goats and my chickens, because my chickens run with my goats. And so my chickens eat right along with the goats.
So they're creating fertilizer. They're helping you with the soil by pecking and scratching.
Yeah. My chickens are my little tillers,
Yeah.
They're the ones, my composters, and in fact, I'll even haul in compost right into the chickens, and they just stir it up, and they love it.
What was it that we saw one day? We were visiting another farm, Alicia's farm, and it had the big pile of, is it compost or manure?
Yeah,
and it was
it
full
was-
of those big juicy grubs.
Yeah.
Which most people think are a pest, and most people would run to buy the
Yeah.
chemical to get rid of the grubs.
Right.
And you said,
Yeah.
just let me in here with my chickens for
Yeah.
a few days.
Yeah,
It's a win-win.
I mean, I was digging in there, and there was just hundreds of these, and so I says, don't you have chickens, And they said, well, yeah. And I says, you need to build your chicken pen around this pile and let them dig in the soil, because they love those grubs. And because they'll just dig in there and eat those grubs.
It's a delicacy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then you get richer eggs. So
Yeah, exactly. So chickens are great, and I always turn I have some chickens I turn out on my garden kind of towards the end of the season. I also have ducks, and the ducks do a good job, and, weeding or, I have to be careful when I first plant the garden, because they'll eat my new starts.
yeah,
But
there's
once-
a timing thing with regenerative farming practices.
exactly.
There's the right time
Yeah.
to release the animals
Yeah.
into certain
You know,
areas of your farm.
Yeah, having the animals just graze, okay, it's not time for grazing. I pen them up and feed them that way, but then there's a time that I put them out and let them go ahead.
Let them
and
do the work for
do
you.
their work, yeah.
Did you see the movie, The Biggest Little Farm?
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember when they had the problem with the slugs?
Oh,
And then they let the ducks out. The ducks
Yeah.
were like, yum.
Oh,
And they were
yeah.
like, oh, we found the answer.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it's so many times it's like that.
oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, ducks really clean up on slugs, I mean, they're just fun little animals to have. I don't have a lot of them. I used to have about 30, and I cut back to about 10. And 10 just kind of wander around, and they just feed themselves. And I hardly ever have to feed them. They feed their browsers. They go around, feed themselves. Some of the chickens I let out, they feed themselves. So it cuts way back on what I have to feed my chickens too.
Oh my gosh,
So,
yes.
Yeah,
Plus, they're out there fertilizing. So
Oh, yeah.
now you're not buying pesticides, you're not buying insecticides, you're not buying fertilizer.
yeah. In fact, in the wintertime, I'll turn my ducks into my high tunnel, and they'll poop all over the place, and then I go in the early spring, and I just sweep it out, and that just goes down in the little holes. So I don't have. I guess my farm's a little different because I use fabric instead of leaving the soil bare, I use a fabric which is really good for the soil. And it helps me in a couple of ways in cutting my weeds back. And also, I know exactly how much new compost to put in each hole as I'm replanting. Then that's how I recycle my compost.
And that helps you to manage the farm too, because
yeah.
you and your wife manage that farm pretty much by yourselves. Is
Oh,
that
yeah.
correct?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
And that's a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, we were to a point that, was just trying to do, gardening and weeding we just couldn't keep up. We either do something different or we give up. And so then we found this nylon fabric, which is, it doesn't break down easily. And so we just spread it out on our soil after I got all the soil and the infrastructure and everything in. Then I put it on, and then I just burned holes where I wanted to plant, and I didn't go anywhere less than 6 inches. And then I have areas for squash. I have areas for my trees, my orchards, and all of a sudden we can manage it because all of a sudden it totally took care of a lot of the weeds, but there was one thing: would get weeds that would come up in the little holes, and then would use the contact organic, which you introduced us to,
non-toxic,
non-toxic, and we would just as the early season before we'd plant, would see these little weeds come up, and we'd just spray in the hole, take care of those little weeds, and just a day later would go in and plant, and that was. So, I mean, it just took care of a huge amount of work that now we didn't have to worry about. We just had to worry about getting things planted, watering, and watch it come up.
Right. And then tell people a little bit about your seed. You do some seed saving, but then you have a shed where you store the food that you produce.
So that was one of the things my wife, she wanted a place to put tools and so forth. And I said, well, I'll build you a tool shed. When I got done, I got thinking, we need a garden kitchen because we didn't want to do all of our processing, everything in the house. And so I built her this garden kitchen. And so we're able to go in and do all of our processing of food in there. We have our food dehydrator and freeze dryer, and so. But then we also have our seeds that we have labeled, and we have a potato cellar in the underneath, and there's where we store all of our seeds. And we have about 3 years supply of seeds that we always have on hand. So. It's great that Sandra loves that part of it. She's the one that keeps track of that, organizes it. It's her kitchen. And so it's a great thing, to have that.
I was amazed. I remember when I first visited your farm and I saw those, I don't know what you call them, the saps, the containers where you put the, duck eggs or eggs to scramble or beef stew or these packs. It's just amazing. Right. They get all skinny and you just put them in these cases and, and they'll last for a long time.
Well,
right?
So we went to freeze drying because a lot of our processing, we did bottling and stuff, but we found that most of your bottling will only last 2-3 years and then it's expired, and then you're either throwing it out and a lot of people actually bottle more. Yeah, you have to hurry and eat it. And so when we started freeze drying, we found that the food done correctly, freeze drying and packaged properly, will last up to 25 years. And you can open that, pour some warm water in there, and it tastes. Sometimes it tastes better. It tastes really good. I dehydrate. I freeze dry my eggs. I freeze dry my milk. All of those things, my herbs, all of those things I freeze dry, package them up. And it takes up less room, and so as far as having that food storage or available to me is
It's
great.
amazing.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that you did on your farm well, there are 100 things that are amazing, but another thing to add to the list is your heating system.
Yeah.
Can you tell everyone a little bit about
Yeah,
that?
so our goal was to make the farm totally self-reliant or, to where we didn't have to walk off the farm to eat, to know that we were okay. And so I did a lot of research, came up with my son-in-law had a wood furnace. And so I finally ordered one of the largest wood furnaces. And then what it does is it's outside, I just stack it up, logs, and it actually works to where it works so efficient that it burns the smoke. So it's EPA approved so that there's no smoke that
You're not
that comes
polluting
out.
the
Yeah, you're not
environment.
polluting, yeah, and so it's approved for EPA approved. And it will heat a 4,000 square foot home. It heats my solar building, and it heats two little areas, kind of apartment areas that family, when they come, they can stay, and it will heat those. So this is all radiant heat.
That's the best.
actually-
That's the best kind of
Yeah.
heat.
Yeah, so, I don't deal with the high electric bill. It's cut way back on the electric bill. It's cut way back on my heating and everything like that. So, and not only that, but I can also use that to get charcoal. So I'll get to the charcoal to a certain point, and I don't let it, because it will burn. It will totally burn that up ash to where it'll burn the ash down so well. So I'll actually wait until it gets down to where the charcoal is not burned out and crunchy, and then I'll pull it out. I'll
To
pull it
save
out
it.
and mash it up and save it so I can put it on my garden, because it
Yeah, I was going
extends
to
the
ask, do
life.
you use it in your garden or your
Yeah.
fire pit?
Yeah, I use it in my garden once it's mashed up, because the charcoal itself will lengthen or create a longer length of nutrition. It actually helps in storing the nutrition within these little tiny, microscopically, you look at it and they're little cubes that actually draw in the nutrition and the water, and so it helps in moisture, it helps in the longevity of the nutrition that's within the soil. It's
So
amazing.
I don't know the answer to this, but you don't have any of the typical expenses, say, of going down to the farm and ranch store or whatever to buy any of those inputs that a lot of people invest quite a lot of money in. You just have the thing going all by itself, just cycling.
Yeah.
And have you ever done any testing on your soil for levels of nutrition or minerals? Have you ever tinkered with that? Because a lot of people, a lot of regenerative farmers and other soil experts, landscaping experts, they'll do soil testing and they can send it to like the University of Utah or whoever to do an analysis. I don't know. I have never spoken with them about how much of an analysis they do. Do you know if they go into any of the fungal or bacterial activity? Like, how deep do they go? And have you done any of that sort of testing of your soil?
Yeah, I used to have my soil tested every year to find out, and every year it seemed like that the nutritional value of the soil increased each year. Now it gets to the point now I don't even have it tested.
Well, you can kind
Because-
of tell by
yeah.
what you see growing.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that is, I was doing some research, and the research team was checking food that came from a grocery store to check to see what the density, the nutritional
Nutrient
density.
density.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then they would take tests on a farm that was not using any pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, anything.
Right.
So and developing and what they found was that the nutrient dense food on those farms or gardens was like over 10 times.
It's
It's
crazy,
just
isn't it?
way more nutritious. It's just, and people don't understand that. People,
they don't get
the
it.
public does not
They don't know.
understand.
They
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah, it's so incredible. And they say, well, it's more expensive to buy,
Yes.
and you say, but how important is your health,
I just had this conversation the other day with someone who, the idea of regenerative farming and all this was brand new to him.
Yeah.
And he said, well, he said, how are you going to get people to pay more? And I said, well, it depends how much they value their health.
Right.
Because you can get the $1.99 burger today and tomorrow and for the next year, but eventually you're going to pay the pharmacist or you're going to pay the hospital. And those bills are catastrophic for families. They are
Yes.
catastrophic when they hit. So at least in our family, and I'm sure in yours, we feel it's more important to invest in the food with the high nutrition, low chemical content up front, so that down the road, we're not going to be spending money at the hospital. And this is the thing, and this is kind of the mindset that we have to change.
Yeah.
We have to get people to stop looking for cheap food now, because it's not giving them the nutrition they need.
Yeah.
It's not helping their bodies. It's not helping their physique. And
Right.
it's definitely not helping them down the road when they need to be healthy and strong.
Just to give you an example, so as of today, I turned 74.
Is today your birthday?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, thanks.
Happy birthday, Russ.
Yeah. So
A very young 74
yeah,
indeed.
well, so the interesting thing about that is I go into the doctor for my yearly checkup, and the first thing they ask is they want to know what medication
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
on,
Right. What pills?
and I say, no, I don't have a problem. I'm not on any kind of medication. I just, I take some supplements, but mainly I eat out of my garden. I raise my own herbs. I raise my, and all the green plants are, considered herbs to me. And I have all my chicken eggs, I get 3 dozen eggs a day. And, and I have fresh goat milk.
Yeah.
And I say, and I go to the gym 3 days a week.
I didn't even think of it. Well, you're working in your farm.
Yeah, I work on my
You
farm.
don't even have to, that's your gym almost.
Right, it is almost.
But
Yeah.
I forgot to ask you, I'm with my boys.
Yeah.
They're athletes and they eat a lot. And I'm going to have to come by and pick up some eggs. I didn't even think of calling.
You
but
have to. I
yeah,
have some.
Gotta have some of your delicious
Yeah.
eggs. But can we ask you, I know it's a lot, so this is
No,
hard, but
sure.
how many varieties of plants do you have on your farm? Because there are,
Oh, yeah. So I have a CSA, so I try to raise quite a variety because I sell to the public. And I'll raise all of my different types of lettuces because, a lot of people, lettuce is lettuce, but it's not. You got
Oh,
three
no.
different. So you find out that your red lettuce, your green lettuce, your all of your different types of lettuce are different in the nutritional value. So you always want to use all 3 lettuces
Yes.
in your salad.
eat a rainbow.
Yeah, eat it. And so I have the Swiss chard and kale and I've got, then I get into beets, which is just so good for your blood and so forth. So blood, those kinds. I have, I'll raise tomatoes. I have a high tunnel and I raise a variety of different tomatoes and they are great. And people in the valley say, I can't raise tomatoes. And I said, well, you need to come to my place. I say, because I have many different varieties and they are so good.
Yes.
I mean, you think, oh, a tomato is a tomato, they all taste the same.
Oh, no.
Well, I'll tell you, they don't taste the same. I've got some that taste like candy, and you'll sit there and just eat them.
I'll tell you the one thing about I mean, being in sort of this movement where first my family went completely organic, and then our kids got healthier, and we were convinced that was the greatest thing. And then we started to know more and more farmers, and now the movement is for regenerative food,
Right.
which has very high nutrient density, which you were talking
Yeah.
about. But the foods that have the higher nutrient density taste the best. They have the
Right.
most flavor. It's almost like you can taste the nutrition.
Yeah.
It just has a higher level of flavor.
Yeah.
It's so much nicer.
Well, and they contain the water. The water, you can bite into, like my peppers, my green peppers and yellow, red peppers. You just bite into those, and it just crunchy and full of water, and tastes good. I didn't used to like peppers, but I eat peppers all the time now because they just have flavor. And my
Yes.
tomatoes have so much flavor. All of them.
Yes.
I mean, my spinach, I love the taste of the spinach because it's also has that crunchy, full of moisture, and it just has just a flavor that's just really good. I mean,
Right.
but we raise berry bushes. We have over 100 different fruit trees.
Unbelievable.
And we have strawberries, raspberries, blackberries. And here's another thing that a lot of people said they couldn't raise, and that was like grapes. And this last year, after 3 years, and usually it takes about 3 years before they really, but we had so many grapes this year. It was just amazing. So
Why don't you talk to some people who are listening? Why don't you tell people what a CSA is? They might not know.
yeah. So a CSA is a community service agriculture. And what that is that it gives gardeners the opportunity to be able to sell to the public without the public having to pay tax, sales tax on the food, and the person that's raising it doesn't have to pay tax on what they sell. And so that's the advantage of the CSA. But
Well, it's also the advantage that you get food from a farmer you know.
exactly right. And that's what we're trying to push in our community is, and that's another thing that we've been trying to do, having started Heber Valley Self-Reliant Group,
Yes.
was to be able to, I mean, within 1 year, we went from no membership to over 500 members in our organization. It's a nonprofit organization. We're teaching the community how to raise food. And so we have people coming there and say, I don't know how to raise a garden. I don't have a green thumb. And I said, we can teach you. So
Tell them about what we did in the potato field
Oh, yeah.
as a group.
So another thing we started was that, our real true goal here is to create a community that is totally self-reliant. And we thought, how can we do that? And so this last year, we planted, we had people that donated money to where we could buy the potato seeds. And then we got our organization, people that came out and they chopped the potatoes, cut them up. And this is a new experience because most people had never planted potatoes.
Yeah, I was there. I'd never planted potatoes. It was
I
exciting.
mean, it was really fun for a lot of people. And then we put it in the planter and we planted 1.5 acres of potatoes. And then we didn't have to do a lot of work. We did maybe one weeding, couple weedings there, and then we just watered it. And by the end, when we harvested over 25,000 pounds of potatoes. And we had 3 days, we 3 half days. And we thought, well, we're going to invite the public. We want everybody in the community to know about it. And we put big signs out, this is our potato patch. And so those that helped us all along got potatoes free. If you were there
Got
all the
one
way
bag
through
or
it,
something. I can't
you got a
20
bag of
pounds
potatoes.
or
Yeah, it's 35 pounds.
35 pounds.
Yeah. And so those people got, and then if you came and helped us harvest, then you could buy a bag of 35-pound bag for $5. Can you?
Yeah.
You can't get that deal.
What a
anywhere.
bargain.
Yeah, and then if you just wanted to buy a bag, then you could get it for $15 a bag. But the interesting thing is we had so many people, children out there that they were
Families.
running around seeing who could find the biggest potato. and families. It was it was the most wonderful sight. And those people says, we had people that had just barely moved into the community, and they just kept saying, I've never seen anything like this. I've
Yeah.
never seen anything like it.
Everyone together.
Yeah. And they said, you got to do this again. And I
Yeah.
says, yeah, we're going to continue to expand this in our community.
And the land was donated.
Yeah. The land, the land was sitting vacant. The person was in the future will probably build on it. But because we were able to help him get a green belt, a grant on that, then he's able to take that from his taxes. It reduces his tax on the property. And we're able to use it. We planted the potatoes. We're looking at next year, probably trying to work wheat grains into that and maybe
Wonderful.
corn. So we're looking for people anywhere that is not using property that they want to donate to us for a year to where we can actually plant and then
Yeah,
get the community
The
involved.
potato patch, I remember after we planted everything, you guys whipped in the irrigation too. You like laid that down in no time.
Yes, yeah,
You stuck in the sprinklers and you were
Yeah.
like, that's it, we're just gonna let it go. And
Yeah.
then a lot of us also, we were planting with your wife,
right,
Sandra. We were planting plants around the edge of the field that
Yes.
would deter pests.
yeah,
And also the peas
yes,
for the nitrogen
Right.
were planted interspersed with the potatoes
right.
so that there was nitrogen, and then we had pest control just by planting certain plants.
Yeah, and it was interesting, Cassandra, she's always, and we always like to have flowers in our garden, so we have lots and lots of different flowers, but she planted basil around with marigolds,
Yes.
and then,
And wildflowers.
and
I
then,
can't
and then there was
remember what it
and then we planted tall wildflowers in there. And the interesting thing is the people that came to get potatoes says, can I get seeds? Can I harvest seeds from the flower?
Yes.
And we says, yeah, just, the basil's there, just,
Yes, and Sandra
Yeah.
brought all the seeds from your farm.
Yeah.
She just had them in
Yeah.
Ziplocs, and she just brought them, and so
yeah, it was
just amazing.
yeah, people kept wondering, how come they're planting flowers out in this field? And then when they discovered it was a potato field, they couldn't believe it.
yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, it was very fun.
I just got a little sticky note, but I don't have a lot of light at my desk. But I think we're going to questions and answers. So I think we have Leighton with us, who's going to help us with the Q&A. Leighton, I'm not sure what to do. Hang on a second, everyone. I apologize. There we are. Sorry, Laurie, I had the wrong switch on.
That's okay. That was amazing. I loved it. Just a quick question. If we talked about regenerative farming, could you
Yes.
just kind of, for our listeners who are listening in and really don't understand what that is, can you kind of just go over that again, what you were both talking about?
Sure. Why don't you go into it, Russ? Why don't you
Yeah,
like
so.
sort of the definition of it and
Yeah.
what the principles are?
So I guess you could say organic farming, but to me, regenerative farming is different and better because you're even going a little bit further as far as helping to develop the soil, and that's the whole thing. I mean, the soil, if you was to look at the soil, it's identical to everything we need in our body. And so, so we need to really focus on the soil and and that's why they call it regenerative. Is bringing the soil back,
Bringing the
to
life back.
bringing the life back. So you see, my garden, I tell people that my garden has become a living organism. It's alive. My
I love
garden
that.
is alive. It's a living organism. And people have never thought of it that way, because they just think dirt, and I say, no, if you dig down in there, you're going to find all kinds of great bacteria that's going on there. You've got a whole world down underneath the surface of the ground if it's working with the generative gardening principles.
The healthy system. If anyone has any questions they'd like to ask, you can call in at 885-899-2134. So we would love to take questions if anyone wants to call in. Otherwise, Russ and I will just keep talking for several hours. And
So I have a question. Somebody actually just texted my cell phone the question. Not really sure why, but Russ, what are your feelings? I mean, you both kind of mentioned the minerals and the nutrients, and I know that with what we are seeing right now, with even some of our children that are missing key nutrients that they may not be feeling, as brain strong as they could be. Maybe they're losing focus a little bit while they're in school or doing homework. Do you feel that in conventional farming, the way that they are farming right now, do you feel that it's damaging the soil enough that it could be harming our children and getting the proper nutrients because they're missing?
Oh, without a doubt. The chelation of the Roundup.
I see that, and having been an educator, I have seen within the educational system the growing number of children that have mental disorders, that have become more and more serious within the school. I mean, just attention deficit is a huge problem within in school, and I've taught school for over 35 years, and had 2 different private schools, and this is a huge problem, and it has to do with the soils. Where is our food coming from? And it's coming from farms that use fertilizers that are not good, and using
All the
pesticides,
synthetic
herbicides, all of these products. And they say that, and I have a son-in-law that deals with, big projects, and it just, they say, well, it depletes out of the soil quickly, but it doesn't. I mean, it either leaves the soil sterile. That's one of the problems, is that it will kill off all of the good bacteria, and it leaves the soil sterile to where you just can't get the nutritional value that your body needs, because, like I say, the earth and the soils, the good soils of the earth, are identical to the what we need as nutrition within our body.
The minerals are the key to the engine. One of our
it is.
scientist friends, Dr. Huber, says that.
Right.
The minerals are the keys to our engine. And, the big daddy out there is Roundup. And, glyphosate was originally a pipe cleaner because it gloms onto minerals and it would pull it out of the pipes. It would extract the calcium and mineral buildup within the pipes and clean them out. That's how powerful it is. And when it gets in the soil or touches anything, it gloms onto the minerals. So the minerals might still seem to be present, but they're not bioavailable. So we can't have them.
Right.
So the more these farming systems go on, the worse our soil is getting out there, and the worse our health is deteriorating. And, when I got the question the other day, well, how are you going to get people not to buy the $1.99 burgers? I said, well, people are going to have to make a decision where they want to put the dollars that they do have. It's a lot of times it's a question of budgeting and figuring things out like you have. I would say the way you've done things is very economical.
Yeah.
And you have now a very healthy food source for not only your family, but the whole community.
Right.
And it hasn't been outrageously expensive to do so. And farmers who create good food deserve to have a premium paid to them. And in our family, we would much rather pay the premium to farmers like Russ, or ranchers who are conscientious, who raise, excellent beef or whatever it is. We'd much rather give our dollars to them than some fast food chain, right? Because in the end, all that food seems convenient, but it's pricey. It adds up. And if you look at your family budget, change out what you can. Start with one thing at a time. I think that we discussed oils last time, Laurie, when we were together with the group, with everybody.
Right.
Start changing out one thing at a time, but you need to decide where you want to put your dollars. You can either put your dollars in the local fast food joint and then the doctor and then the hospital down the road, or you can put those dollars in the pockets of local farmers like Russ who are raising food that you should want to feed your family.
Agreed. And it
Yeah.
looks like we've got a caller with a
good.
question.
Yep. Hey, Kathleen. Hey, Laurie. Hey, yeah, we got a caller calling in. Her name is Patti. Patti, the Wellness Crusaders are ready for you. What question do you have for them?
Hi, Patti.
Oh, hi. Okay. Thank you so much for this wonderful information, and I look forward to coming up to Russ's farm. I wanted more clarity on the mycorrhiza. Did I get that right in the beginning of your talk? Is that's the soil, right? Or
The mycorrhiza. What is
Yeah, the
that?
mycorrhiza is a fungi. It's a mycorrhiza fungi that has to be started within the soil. So, there are some groups that actually you can buy mycorrhiza. So mycorrhiza has a tendency to go dormant, but once you get it back into the soil and watering it and going, then it will start to regenerate and start to grow within the soil. So, and that's what my compost has in it. So, I have a lot of people now using my compost, and it gets things going a little faster.
Tell them about your compost and how you've been supporting your community by giving it to people or selling it to people.
Well, so my wife and I teach classes, and we're coming up the next year, which I'd like to let everybody know. We have a spring fair, which will be in March the 23rd. And so we promote education. We try to help educate people within the community. But so what I did was, I don't know why I did this, but I was getting to where I had a lot of compost, and I thought, I want to give back to my community. I want to help people get started growing gardens. And so I said, I will give away for one summer, I'll give away a load of compost to people that wanted to expand their gardens or start new gardens. And so I said, the only thing I'll charge is my delivery charge. And so I probably gave away several $1,000s worth of my compost. But I needed to do that because I felt that my community, people within our community, that's what we're trying to do, become self-reliant people.
yeah. Right. Oh, that is wonderful. So generous. I love that. Well, I hope my husband and I can attend your class in March.
That would be wonderful.
One other quick question. What's that? One other quick question for you, Russ.
Yes.
Is the freeze drying process very difficult?
It's actually quite easy. My freeze dryers are set up to where it will actually, it comes with a manual, but right on the screen, it tells you what to do. It'll tell you when to turn the freeze dryer on and when to defrost it. And, it just goes through, and I haven't had any trouble, except if you add too much honey in with the salsa, it likes to explode in your freeze dryer.
I wonder why that is.
Yeah, well, it's just the honey and sugars just, when it starts to freeze dry, and then it just kind of just puffs up like
Wow.
like candy. You can freeze dry candy, and it causes the candy itself to kind of swell up or explode. So kind of fun.
Oh, well, thank you so much. That helps me a lot. And keep doing the great work you're doing. And thank you again.
Oh,
Thanks
glad
for
to.
calling.
Yeah, thanks for calling.
Thank you.
Pass the word around.
Okay,
Thank you for calling, Patty, and make sure to check in next week with us at 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. You have a great day, Patty.
thank you.
Now,
All right. Looks like we
something-
have another caller calling also. I'm going to bring them right up.
This is good.
Yeah.
All right. We have Lynn calling from Utah here. Lynn, what is your question that you have for the Wellness Crusaders?
Hi,
Well,
Lynn.
I'm going to tell you that y'all frozen on the internet, so I can't hear anything, or it's just frozen. And then I thought of a question about, I watched a thing about growing mushrooms and how they use horse manure, and they also use chicken manure. And the soil is so much richer and whatnot. Do you mix the horse manure and the hay and the shavings and then the chicken manure and whatever they do their stuff in?
So the wood chips, and it can be big wood chips. It has to be shredded. It has to be small wood chips. Otherwise, it decomposes too slow. And not only that, but it needs to be decomposed, because if you just throw wood chips on and till it into your soil, it'll actually steal the nitrogen from your soil. So then you're going to have to put more nitrogen on. So you need to make sure that your wood chips have started about a year, needs to be decomposing for about a year. And that gives that time for that, the mycorrhiza. And you want to keep it damp too, because the mycorrhiza likes damp. And so that way it gives the mycorrhiza an opportunity to start decomposing the wood chips. And that's how I found it. It's not all compost that you can get mycorrhiza going in. It's mainly shredded wood chips that it really likes. And then you go ahead and you start mixing in, like we've with the farm there. It has hay, alfalfa, and others. But I will go ahead and mix in with that my chicken manure, goat manure, and things like that into my compost as well.
Does charcoal help? Like ashes and stuff like that?
Ashes, yeah, it's best. Ashes is okay, but ashes is different than biochar. Biochar is when it gets it, you still have the clumps. It's black, but it hasn't turned to ash. And
More like charcoal.
yeah, it's more like charcoal. So you then crush it down up, and then you mix it in, and you don't need a lot. You don't want a whole lot. You just sprinkle it on in with your like if you're doing plants, growing starts and stuff like that. You just sprinkle a little bit in, or if you're mix it in with your other soils, you don't need a lot of it. It's kind of spreads thin, but I try to do that every year, mix it in with any time that I dig out soil, I take my soil, put it back in the compost, and then I put new compost with the biochar in it.
All right. I remember my dad, we had a coal furnace, and we had to take the clinkers out and also the ashes out. And then he would they'd go in a bucket, and of course it was a metal bucket. And once it cooled, he'd go out and take it out and spread it in the garden area, and along with other mixtures of manure and whatnot. And
Yeah.
we always had a really plush garden, so that's why I was asking about the
Yeah, that's good. That's exactly what you need to do. Yeah.
Thank you for calling, Lynn. Thank you for your question.
Yep. Thank you for calling, Lynn. Make sure you check in with us next week at 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time.
Do we have
All
enough?
right. We're going to hop right into the next caller here. All right, we have Jade calling, another Utah local. Jade, what question do you have for the Wellness Crusaders?
Hi, I am wondering, I live in a basement apartment and I get very little light, but would love to start an indoor garden. What do you suggest?
You know, that is a great question. I have people all the time say, I have a very little yard, or I live in an apartment. And I said, you know, you can turn your whole apartment into a garden, you know. But in the basement, you need a little bit more light. So grow lights, if you can put grow lights in there, that's going to help a lot to bring that light down in to the, what your plants are going to need. And you can even put those on timers so that you're, you know, they're not on all the time, but you can put on the timers. And it makes a big difference. So, you know, you can do, and I don't know if you're using planter boxes or exactly what you're using, but I've used planter boxes inside in the house, and of course you have to be careful with moisture there, and so you don't need a lot of water, but you just need to keep it moist. And your plants will do fine. But you need that good mixture of compost. Compost is so important to the nutrition of the soil. It's live plant life. You know?
I would add I don't recommend the hydroponic systems they sell sometimes for indoor growing. It's all about the soil, and the magic happens when you have the soil and the soil biology all working together symbiotically. And hydroponic systems are sort of water-based, and they take the soil out and you sort of inject whatever nutrients someone decided you should have for your plants. And they may work and the plants look good, but I would recommend sticking with a system that includes soil if you can.
Yeah, I've seen some systems that, pardon?
Sorry,
Sorry?
do my planter boxes need to have drains in them, or would they be drainless ones?
It's, you know, I think it's just, you need to have a deep boxes so that your root system can go down in as deep, but that way you don't have to water it so much that you have water pooling up. You don't want water necessarily pooling up in the bottom of your pan there. So, you know, I mean, like if you're raising tomatoes inside, which is a good thing, you know, I've raised tomatoes inside, and they don't, you know, there's just certain plants, they like water, but they don't want too much. They're just very fickle about what I've learned about. So you have to be very consistent the way you're watering tomatoes, but greens, you know, I mean, I even do like my winter gardening is like in a jar. You know, I grow sprouts all the time, and sprout gardening in the winter is they're actually, the sprouts is more nutritious than the parent plant itself. You get way more, 10 times more nutrition from the sprouted plants, and I just put them in a jar. And it's the seed that gets them sprouted, and you just have to make sure that when you just get the sprout started, and then you rinse them twice a day, and you need to make sure that there's no standing water in it, and you just rinse them, and you'll get, you know, you can mix so many different types of sprouts, you know, alfalfa sprouts, all of your, you know, lettuce sprouts, radish sprouts. And you mix those, you end up having a wonderful salad, or stuff that you put on your salad that you're growing. So lots of things you can do inside.
Okay. Yeah, that's great information. Thank you so much.
I even encourage people, like I have a person that I work with closely, and she goes around and helps people do how to work gardens into your landscape. You know, why not grow a squash plant right in around your bushes? Or why not, instead of putting bushes that don't produce anything, why not put in a berry bush like red currants or gooseberries or something like that, that gives you food in your yard, and they look beautiful.
Yeah, instead of like a useless hedge, you can
Yeah.
plant a hedge of berries.
Definitely, yeah.
Exactly. I love that idea.
Thank
Yeah.
you for calling.
The garden. Thank you.
Thank you
You're
for
welcome.
calling.
Yep. Thanks for calling in, Jade, and make sure to check in next week at 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Oh,
Thank you, DJ Flyboy.
Are there any other callers?
all right. We have one more caller. Let me bring them up on in. Hey, Terry, you're on with the Wellness Crusaders. What question do you have for Laurie and Kathleen and Russ?
Well, hello.
Hello.
I'm hoping you can help me diagnose a problem with my garden raised beds. I put in raised garden beds a few years ago, and soil that we put in them was donated by a friend, a very generous friend who even hauled it here for us. But they've never been very productive. They don't. I put, I plant hundreds of seeds in them, and maybe a few will sprout, but most of them don't. If I put in, we'll get the plants from the nursery. They sit there and they like they're in suspended animation. They're the same size 2 months later. And I recently read an article about something called killer compost, and I'm wondering if that's what's going on with these beds.
Well, I had a friend who was having the very same problem, and he even bought his soil from my garden, from a nursery, and so yeah, you really have to be careful. You really have to know where your soil's coming from. Don't just take anybody's soil. You really need to know where it comes from, because you don't know where it's been and what it's been used for in the past. And so one of the things, in fact, I looked at it and I says, you're going to be best to just take this soil out. This is not good soil. You need to get it out and redo this. And I don't know if that's what you'll have to do or not, but one of the things you need to do is, the problem with garden boxes is a lot of garden boxes will not, you have to put worms in it, because worms will not come into the garden box. And worms is absolutely important to the nutrition of the garden, or the garden boxes. And the other thing is that you won't get the mycorrhiza unless you've started it previous to, and you have the mycorrhiza that you're putting into the garden box. But you've got to have a mixture. You can't just put compost in it. You've got to have a good mixture of good soil along with your compost. And you'll see such a difference. And then you want to start composting yourself. I just encourage people, learn how to learn how to do your own composting, and learn how to make a compost tea. Compost tea is absolutely important. And just quickly, a compost tea, I will take all of my some of my green plants, my best green plants, and I'll take those and I put them in a 5-gallon bucket, and I'll even take good important weeds that are just healthy weeds, and I put them in there, and then I add a potato that's just really ground up really good, because it needs the sugars to collect. And all of a sudden, you'll put it out in the sun and you watch it every day, and within 3 days you're going to start to bubble. You're going to start seeing the good active yeast created in there of good bacteria in that, and then you strain that off really well and you put that on your plants, and you'll see a huge difference on how well your plants will do just by using compost tea.
Yeah, I want to input something too, and I don't know if you know about David Johnston. David Johnson, I think, out of New Mexico. He has videos on YouTube about composting systems that he puts together with PVC pipe. They're really not expensive, and very effective. But there's a lot of information on composting and compost teas online that you can find.
Yeah, very important,
Yeah.
but try to build your own stuff. Try to get away from
Do
the
homemade.
commercial. Try to develop your own stuff.
Okay. That compost tea sounds easy. I'm definitely going to try that.
Yeah, you'll see a great change.
I have another question. In those same beds, if I dig anywhere in them, if I dig out a shovel full of dirt, it's going to be full of roots, even when in places where there's, it's not near a plant. Is that where is this coming from? There's such a thing as a weed that's just a root but doesn't have a green portion to it.
No, not that I know of. Roots, I always like to see roots in there. Roots is important in a part of the decomposition of, and in fact, I never pull out my plants. I just cut them off and leave my roots in the soil because it helps in giving the channel for other plants. When you plant the next year, those roots still left in there, it gives that plant the opportunity to grow faster, the roots to grow faster down into the soil through those roots that are already been established.
Okay. All right. Well, wonderful. Thank you.
The other thing, just another side note there, is that you want to do towards winter, if you're done, you want to plant a cash crop in there, a crop that has lots of nitrogen, like Austrian winter peas or beans or
Radishes.
anything that creates
Clover.
daikon radish. They go deep. They're big radishes, but what they do is they put nitrogen back into the soil, and you can plant them not like Austrian winter peas. They will withstand weather, cold weather up to 15 degrees, and still continue to grow. And they will you'll have lots of little white nodules that will create there. And once you chop them off, you never want to pull them. You just chop them off and leave the roots in, and it drops the nitrogen right in the soil. And then you're ready for next year. You've got your nitrogen all ready to go for the next year.
You don't have to go to the store.
Yeah. Don't ever go to the store and buy nitrogen. Always, in fact, even around my fruit trees, I plant a little like peas or beans or stuff like that around the bottom of my trees, because that helps dump nitrogen in the soil for my trees, fruit trees and stuff.
Okay.
Called companion planting, or the three sisters, you do
Companion planting.
companion
Yeah.
planting.
Yeah, the three sisters. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks a
Well,
lot.
thanks for your question. Yeah.
You bet.
Yep. Thank you for calling in, Terry. And make sure to check in with us next week at 4 p.m. Mountain Time till 6 p.m. Standard Mountain Time. And you have a wonderful day, Terry.
I want to add something. We got some questions on the mycorrhiza, and you were talking about the wood chips being particularly good as long as they're sort of already starting to decompose.
Right.
I want to share that the science that I've learned in terms of both landscape and ag is that the soil in the forests is the richest in terms of mycorrhiza and all this activity that's going on and all this richness. And people are tapping into that now. There's a movie, there's a show on Netflix. I think it's called Fantastic Fungi. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's absolutely amazing. It's literally magic, this stuff. And it talks about how in the forest floor this is going on, and trees sort of seem to be the top of the kingdom, I suppose, in terms of sharing information and nutrients and this whole exchange that goes on. And a lot of farmers are tapping into that now, and they're actually farming in forests, or they're raising pigs in forests. It's called, forested pork, I guess, forested pork. And regenerative farmers are selling this for a premium because it's delicious and it's super high in nutrition. And the animals couldn't be happier. They live incredible lives. They have one bad day. And all of this helps with the climate. All this helps pull down the carbon from the atmosphere. If anyone's worried about carbon, what we need are more cows, more pigs, more chickens, more goats, and more farmers working with this kind of system. This is what will actually solve any climate concerns.
Yeah, and one of the things that, I just watched, there's this movie on, it's called Homesteaders, and one of the things, a person had pigs and they were just, letting them run just all over the place, and which is, I guess, fine, but pigs can also, just like cattle, can overgraze. And so it's best if you section them off and move them before they overgraze. So you move them to another section and then let them stay there for a while and then move them again. And this is where most of your farmers, big farmers, are actually cutting their cost of raising cattle way down, because
Just rotating.
they just rotating them around, and then they're they're stomping it down, breaking it down, and
But they-
manure and
Yeah,
everything.
They don't destroy it.
They don't destroy it, and then they move them on, and then that
Everything
comes back
And
so
then the
much.
chickens, then they bring the chickens in to follow the cattle. And then they bring in sometimes goats and sheep, and it's all about these rotations in the fields.
Well, one of the things that it was interesting, when they used to drive cattle from Texas up to the rail lines, they found that those areas where they always took their cattle,
Richest farmland.
richest farmland, because the grasslands was so rich,
Yeah,
and because the cattle was gradually moving along, and the manure and everything grazing and so forth and moving, and they come to find out that strip of land to where these cattle was moving was the most valuable and most.
Well, how about the buffalo?
Yeah,
The
buffalo.
buffalo created our Great Plains, and
Yeah.
how'd they do it? They'd eat, poop, and move, eat, poop, and move, and
Yeah.
that's what regenerative
Well,
ag incorporates.
And this is one of the problems is then all of a sudden, what did we do? We came in and we destroyed the land. We came into and created a dust bowl that people then could no longer live there because they didn't know how to farm that land. They just tilled it. And every time you till it, you release nitrogen out into the soil. You've got to quit tilling,
And the carbon.
and the carbon. And then what did they do and down in South America? They go into the rainforest and they just wiped out all of these trees and everything like that, and just raped the soil. I mean, it was just horrible. And now took years to begin to where they could even begin to reuse the soil. They
Yeah,
destroyed the
The
soil.
conventional systems now, the industrial farming systems aren't going to work. And we don't have a choice. We have to stop the industrial ag farming systems. We're destroying the planet. We're destroying our health. The animals aren't healthy or well. And we have to get off this. We have to go back to the ways of our grandfathers,
Yeah.
farming in these ways, thinking about nature and how everything works together symbiotically. Because if we continue this monocrop, chemical, 1,000 cattle trapped here and fed, chemical laden foods before they're butchered, we're just going to wreck the planet and wreck our health. We do not have a choice. We have to start having farmers think like Russ about the whole system.
Well, it's like California. You've got land in California that they can no longer farm because it's dead. It's dead soil, and they can't farm it because of the pesticides, insecticides, the fertilizers that they've dumped on it. It's now dead land.
But the amazing thing is, with regenerative practices, you can bring dead land back to life.
Yeah.
If you watch the documentary on Netflix called Kiss the Ground,
Yeah.
it explains a lot of this, and you can bring it back by using the correct practices and cutting out the deadly chemicals.
Well, I have a friend that actually worked in China when they reclamation on China on just land that had been totally overgrazed. It was so bad that the soils was washing away, and so they went in there and they started to tear it out and reconstruct the land. And now they've recreated this beautiful garden where now they don't let their animals back out on the ground. They actually cut and bring the food to the animals. So they're still grass fed and so forth, but they won't let them back out on the areas that they've brought back to life. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's just about responsible farming and working with nature. I mean, for example, in these fields where they use, synthetic nitrogen fertilizer, the plants perk up, they look green. If it's lawn or if it's corn, whatever it is, it looks great on the top, but it's not great down below. And the plants, the system stops having the ability to create nitrogen in a system, and it ends up needing the synthetic nitrogen again and again because it stops making its own.
Yeah. And even, when you talk about organic, there's not that much, I mean, what's the requirements for organic? You don't use pesticides, herbicides, but what else are they doing? They're not really adding the good, really making that soil rich so that your foods really come alive, that food dense nutrition. And so, when I see organic, that's better than something else, but there's something better than organic.
Right, regenerative is better than organic. Now we're going to the next step, and
Yeah.
that's truly what benefits our health.
Yeah, very
Wow,
true.
those are really good answers. I have a text question to me on my cell phone. It's somebody out of Indiana. They are asking about any information on electroculture gardening. I think the copper rods and people that are
For weed control.
yeah. So you have any comments on that?
I think it's good stuff. I've heard about it. I'm not an expert.
I haven't really had a need to use it. So, that's something that I don't know. I know that copper has the ability to, do a lot of things nutritionally, but at the same time, you have to be careful too. I mean, copper is so important to the nutrition of our body, but it has to be done in small increments to introduced into the body. But it's absolutely necessary. So that's why plants do have copper in them, and it's just like our body. Our body needs it, but you'll find in plants itself that I use to put back into my compost has small amounts of copper.
You don't want too much copper. Copper's
Right.
tricky because it's
It's very
beneficial at the ideal level, and then
But it's very important. Like I say, it's very important.
Okay.
and I've heard that works, but I'm not very
Yeah, I haven't
familiar.
used it in my own.
Okay. I have another text from a young single mom, and I think it's a follow-up question to Jade, who asked the question. In her apartment with her toddler, she has a very limited budget. Where would you suggest she starts?
Well, so if it's just an apartment and she has no, like a balcony or something like that, if she has any kind of anything outside, I'd do whatever you can to plant outside. A lot of the times, the things when you're planting inside, you don't get that fresh air, which is really important to plant life, is that fresh air that's coming in. So if you're going to plant inside, you kind of want to plant them close to a window or something that you can allow that, open it up and allow fresh air to come in. Because otherwise, as you water, you start getting mold. And mold is not good. It's not the same as fungi. And so you have to be careful of that. But I would encourage anyone to if you don't have enough lighting in there, get grow lights. If you can plant by your windows, get your windows open so that you get that nice, fresh, beautiful, the sunlight in there, and then fresh air coming
I
in.
think she was kind of concerned about the toddler getting into it, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Laurie?
Well,
Did it,
yeah, most of the budget was her
The budget.
question.
Yeah,
okay.
and so, there's people out there, you want to just ask around because seeds are expensive. And so you kind of want to ask around, try to get to know people that raise, and, I'm always giving seeds away because I always have way more than I can ever use, and it's seeds that come right from my garden. And so I'll always let my lettuce go to seed, because then it's so easy to just clip off the heads, put them in a paper bag, let them dry in the paper bag, and then I've got them for next year. And the same with any of, spinach and any of those green plants, but I'd ask around for, see a gardener. If you find a gardener, stop and say, hey, do you ever get seeds from your garden, or save seeds? Or so kind of, or put it out. You usually have a community, like we have Ask Heber here, and you put it out and say, hey, has anybody got seeds they want to share?
Or next door, if there's
Yeah.
a next door group.
Yeah. So you kind of
It's-
look for that.
I would actually encourage everyone listening, everyone who's out there farming, to save seeds. Seeds
yeah.
are like treasure, and
Learn
you
how
can
to do
share
that.
them with your neighbors, and they're a treasure. I wanted to go back a little bit. Laurie, were you going to say something?
You know what? I have one follow-up
Oh, okay.
question to something Russ just mentioned. How important is drainage when you're indoor gardening in a garden box?
Well, so what I do is I do have a tray, so I make sure that I have a tray underneath my garden box that allows water to come, and you can actually have a bucket. So I'll put a little. You try to get just a small hose that hose can drain into if you're getting too much, and it will just drain into a bucket, and then you can. And usually it's still good water that could be reused, but because what you've just done is created compost tea. If you're pouring it into your garden boxes, it's going through and it's drawing minerals back out of your soils too. It can do that, and what you do is it will drain into this bucket, and then you can reuse it, pour it back in. But you just want to keep your soil. There's not too many plants that really like soil that's soaky. They like it damp, and so you kind of have to monitor that and check your soils to make sure you're not getting too much water. Because if you get too much water, and then your plants are going to start turning yellow, and the leaves will start turning yellow. So that's kind of an indication there. So yeah, drainage is important. You don't want water setting down there, because water too, if it sets too long in the bottom, then it starts to go stinky. It starts to get bad anaerobic, and you don't want that started.
But
Okay.
then here's the thing, though. Think about it. If someone's saying an apartment, like, how would you structure it? Like, say you have a box where you can put a planter. Would you put like a lift, like something that lifts up another box so there's somewhere for the water to go? Like, how would you do that in an apartment?
Well, usually I'll do pots instead of garden boxes, because usually your pots will have a ring around it where your water will drain out
those
into
little
the
trays.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
they'll drain. And so what you can do is when you water it, you get used to seeing how much water drains out. And usually I'll leave a little water in that bottom drain. I won't take it out. I'll leave it there, because then I watch that, and when it's gone out
Then
of the
you
bottom,
know.
then you know that okay, well, I can water again. But the main thing is mixing it so you have to have enough soil. And people have to understand the difference between compost and soil. You have to have enough soil in there that it does hold the water. And some compost too will collect water and hold it as well. And that's why I say, you just put enough water in there that it gets the water and soil damp and holds water, but doesn't collect water at the bottom. because that's when it goes anaerobic, and you don't want that.
Well, yeah.
Perfect.
That's
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah, a lot of people have trouble with that, so thank
Yeah.
you. What was I going to ask? I was going to talk to you about, I wanted to, before we sign off, I wanted to see if you could tell people how to get a hold of the Heber Self-Reliance Group, because the idea with that group is to have more groups like it throughout Utah so that communities have their own self-reliance groups. And the Heber Self-Reliance Group is special because of their communication and partnership with the Heber City Council.
Right. Yeah, we try to work
And
with the city
CERT,
council and
emergency responders and the sheriff,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of buy-in.
yeah, I'm even working right now with the sheriff's department and the police department, where they're doing a great job in creating emergency preparedness. But we're looking beyond that. We're looking at self-reliance, self-sustainable communities. And so we have a website, which my wife does an excellent job on, and we're trying to put materials on there that educate people. It's a information site. It's Heber Valley. It's HeberValleyReady.org. HeberValleyReady.org, and you can go on there. And we also, my own personal website for our farm is starrygarden.farm.weebly.com. And you can go there, and it's full of information. And we're going to try and continue to build this website so it has an area for actually recipes. How to use, people say, how do you use Swiss chard? Or how do you use kale, or how do you work that into my, and so we're going to try and start getting people to bring in recipes of how they use all of this garden, because you don't want to be raising stuff that you're not going to eat, but you have to also begin to learn how to eat stuff that you don't know how to fix, food with. And so we're going to try and develop that whole areas. And so we'll have a tab in there for recipes. We'll have a tab in there for nutrition. We'll have a deal on self-reliance, self-sufficiency, and also like collecting seeds, also, different areas of how to become self-reliant, as not only as an individual, but help your community. It's because you can't, you've got to get people involved. That's it. That's what we decided.
Build a team.
Yeah, build a team. And when an emergency, when another COVID epidemic hits, you're ready. You don't have to go to the grocery store. You know how to make food yourself. That's
Agreed.
what,
I love it.
store seeds. I once told a guy that he was telling me how important, silver, collecting silver. And I says, you know what? I can take one package of seed and earn more money off of that package of seed than you'll get out of your silver in 1 year.
I love it. That's a really good wrap. So thank you, Kathleen and Russ, and Kathleen and Russ. Russ, can you just say how they found you? How do they find you again? Just one more time. Which is the better website to go, and what's the difference?
You can, and we also have a Heber. It's Heber Valley Self-Reliant group on Facebook. You can go on there, and we put a lot of information on there. Calendar, what type of education. We're going to try and get more and more education on our website, like this here. We want to post it on our website.
Yeah, we'll share it.
So that we can, people can access it later as well. So if you look at HeberValleyReady.org, get on there. We'll have information. I'm the director of that organization, so I'd be happy to, if you'll just communicate there, become a member. There's a place there that you can become a member or ask questions. would be more than happy. I think on that website, it'll give you an email that you can email information, and we can answer questions that way as well.
Thank you so much for coming on. I feel so honored, don't you, Laurie? I feel
Oh
so
my
excited
gosh, I
that you
do.
were on our show. And you're
it's
just
great.
doing so much for everyone. And thank you, Russ.
You know, it's just wonderful because, you know, just like become friends with people. I mean, hundreds of friends that I've made in the last 2 years, hundreds of friends. And it's just wonderful. It's a great experience.
Happy birthday.
Oh,
And
thanks.
yes, happy birthday. And Russ, you and Sandra are doing so much amazing work in the Valley, and we so
Oh.
appreciate everything
We
that
appreciate
you're
that.
doing. Oh, you know what? One final thing before we go. Could you
Sure.
just, the event that is coming up in Heber in March, it's the big
Yes.
show you were just telling me
Heber.
about. Can you just make a quick comment on how do people get involved? How do they get a booth? What's it all about?
Yeah, so we'll be putting that on the website of how you can email us, and you can email me as well. My email is rustyolson@gmail.com. And you can email me there, and that way, you know, if you're interested in coming or interested in teach, I mean, we're always looking for people will, you know, call in and say, yeah, would like to teach a class, you know. And so we're looking at different people that have specialty areas that would be important in helping people to become self-reliant. We're always looking for opportunities for people to educate.
That's perfect. Thank you both so very much. And we
Oh, you're
will,
welcome. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
and we'll see everybody next Thursday, 4 to 6 Mountain Time. And if you have any other questions for Russ, you have his email address. Our email address is info@wellnesscrusaders.com. You can send us an email, and we can also tell you how to get in touch with Russ and his wife. And Russ, happy birthday to you, and thank you for sharing your birthday with us.
You bet.
Good night
It's been
for
great.
now.
Fantastic.
All right,
Bye,
see ya.
everyone.